They said she'd be a beautiful bride. What they didn't say was that she'd be a dead one. Lyra Ashvale pressed her back against the cold stone tunnel wall, her wedding dress torn at the hem, blood on her knuckles from where she'd clawed through the rusted gate. Behind her, the estate blazed with torchlight, her father's men searching, her future husband waiting. Ahead, freedom. Or so she thought, until she heard the voice of the man she loved, laughing. "You really think I'd run away with her? I just needed the vault codes, nothing more." Everything shattered. Welcome to a story of betrayal, survival, and a choice that will shake a kingdom to its core. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments. Let's see how far this reaches. Hit that like button and stick around. Because what happens next, you won't believe it. But the Ashvale estate perched on the northern cliffs like a vulture waiting for something to die. Lyra had always hated it, the way the wind screamed through the towers at night, the way her father's voice echoed through the marble halls with that same cold certainty. Everything in this place was built to last, built to endure, built to trap. She stood in front of the mirror in her chambers, staring at the girl in the wedding gown. White silk, lace sleeves, a neckline that exposed just enough collarbone to be modest by her father's standards, which really meant enough to sell, not enough to cheapen. The dress fit perfectly. She wanted to rip it apart with her bare hands. "Stop fidgeting," her mother said from the doorway, though there was no warmth in the command. Lady Ashvale had stopped pretending to care about Lyra's feelings somewhere around her 16th birthday. "Lord Cadric doesn't tolerate nervousness." Lyra's jaw tightened. "Lord Cadric is 43 years old and smells like horse shit and brandy." Her mother didn't even flinch. "He's also the wealthiest landowner in the northern provinces. Your father has negotiated an exceptional match." "An exceptional sale," Lyra shot back. "Don't be dramatic. You're 22. You should be grateful. Anyone of his stature would even what?" Lyra spun around, her voice rising. "Want damaged goods? Is that what you were going to say?" Her mother's lips pressed into a thin line. "I was going to say consider you, given your reputation." There it was, the unspoken truth that had hung over Lyra's head since she was old enough to understand how the world worked. She wasn't the daughter they'd wanted. She wasn't obedient. She wasn't quiet. She'd questioned too much, challenged too often, rejected too many suitable suitors because they bored her to tears or treated her like a prized mare. And now, her father had run out of patience. Lord Cadric Morven was brutal, controlling, and had buried 2 wives already. Everyone knew it. No one said it. That was the way of things in the northern territories. Power mattered more than decency, and a man with enough land could do whatever he wanted behind closed doors. Lyra was being handed over like a signed contract. "The ceremony is in 2 hours," her mother said flatly. "Fix your face, and for God's sake, smile." The door closed with a soft click. Lyra stood alone in the center of the room, her heart hammering against her ribs. She could feel the walls closing in, could already see the future unfolding in front of her like a roadmap to hell. The wedding. The first night. The years of suffocating under Cadric's control, burying his children, withering into nothing, while he paraded her around like a trophy he'd won. No. No. She turned toward the window. Below, the cliffs dropped away into jagged rocks and black water. The northern sea was unforgiving, cold enough to stop your heart in minutes. But beyond the estate walls, past the gates and the guards, there was a world her father didn't control. And there was Davrin. Her chest tightened at the thought of him. Davrin Holt, the stable master's son, the boy who'd grown into a man while she wasn't looking. Dark hair, sharp eyes, a smile that made her forget she was supposed to be a lady. He was everything her father would never approve of. Lowborn, reckless, and completely, intoxicatingly free. They'd been meeting in secret for months, stolen moments in the stables, whispered plans in the dark. He'd promised her they'd run. Tonight, before the wedding, before she became someone else's possession. Lyra pressed her hand against the cool glass and made her decision. She was leaving. Bah. The tunnels beneath the Ashvale estate were older than the family itself. Smugglers' routes from a time when the northern coast was still contested territory. Lyra had discovered them as a child, crawling through the dark with a stolen candle, mapping every twist and turn in her mind. Now she moved through them like a ghost. The wedding dress was a nightmare to navigate in. Too much fabric, too many layers. But she didn't have time to change. She'd tucked a small leather pouch into her corset, her mother's jewelry, a few gold coins, and the deed to a property her grandmother had left her. Everything she owned that her father hadn't already claimed. Her hands were shaking as she reached the iron gate at the end of the passage. It was rusted shut, the lock corroded from years of seawater and neglect. She grabbed the bars and pulled, her muscles screaming in protest. It didn't budge. "Come on," she hissed, yanking harder. The metal groaned but held firm. Panic flared in her chest. She could hear voices echoing faintly from somewhere above. Her father's men, maybe, or servants looking for her. She didn't have much time. She braced her foot against the stone wall and threw her full weight backward. The gate shrieked open, tearing a gash across her palm. Blood welled up, hot and sharp. But she didn't stop. She shoved through the gap and stumbled out into the narrow alley behind the estate. The night air hit her like a slap, cold, briny, alive. She ran. Her shoes slipped on the wet cobblestones, her dress tangling around her legs, but she didn't slow down. The meeting point was 3 streets over, behind the old chapel, where no one went anymore. Davern would be waiting. He'd promised. He promised. She turned the corner and saw the chapel, dark, sagging, half swallowed by ivy. And there, leaning against the stone wall in the shadows, was a figure. Relief flooded through her so violently she almost sobbed. "Davern!" But as she got closer, she realized he wasn't alone. 2 men stood with him. One she didn't recognize, a broad-shouldered stranger in a traveler's cloak. The other was her father's head steward, a weasel of a man named Greaves, who handled the family finances. Lyra stopped dead. Davern looked up. For a split second, something flickered across his face, surprise maybe, or guilt, but it vanished almost immediately, replaced by that easy, charming smile she'd fallen for. "Lyra," he said smoothly, "you're early. What's going on?" Her voice came out smaller than she wanted. "Who are they?" Davern straightened, glancing at the 2 men. "Just tying up a few loose ends before we leave, nothing to worry about." But the stranger was watching her with an expression she didn't like, cold, calculating. And Greaves had a ledger tucked under one arm. "Davern," her voice sharpened. "What's going on?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair like she was being unreasonable. "Look, it's complicated, all right? Your father's not just going to let you walk away. We needed leverage." "Leverage?" "The vault codes," Greaves said flatly, not even looking at her. "She has access to the secondary accounts." That was the agreement. Lyra's blood went cold. "What agreement?" she whispered. Davern shifted his weight, and for the first time, he didn't meet her eyes. "I told you, it's complicated. Your father's broke, Lyra. The estate's drowning in debt. Cadrick's paying a fortune for this marriage because he thinks you come with money. But the real money? It's in your grandmother's trust, the one you inherited." Her breath caught in her throat. "You—" She couldn't even form the sentence. "You were going to steal from me?" "Don't make it sound so ugly," Davern said, his tone almost defensive. "We were going to share it, start a new life. But I needed the access codes first, and you wouldn't have given them to me if I'd just asked, so you lied." Her voice cracked. "You made me think you loved me." He had the decency to look uncomfortable. "I do care about you, Lyra. I also care about not being poor for the rest of my life." The stranger chuckled, low, dark, amused. Lyra's vision blurred. She felt like she was falling, even though her feet were still on the ground. Every stolen kiss, every whispered promise, every time he'd looked at her like she was the only thing that mattered. It had all been a lie. "You were never going to take me with you," she said quietly. Davern shrugged. "Honestly, no. You're difficult, Lyra. High maintenance. I figured once I had the money, I'd just disappear," she finished. "Yeah." He smiled, like it was all perfectly reasonable. "Nothing personal." Something inside her snapped. She lunged at him. No plan, no strategy, just blind fury. Her fist connected with his jaw, and he stumbled backward with a yelp of surprise. "You bastard!" she screamed, hitting him again. "You lying, worthless—" The stranger grabbed her by the arm and yanked her back with effortless strength. She thrashed against him, but he held her in place like she weighed nothing. "Let me go!" she snarled. Enough, the stranger said, his voice low and edged with authority. He wasn't even looking at her. He was looking at Davern with something close to disgust. This is pathetic. Finish your business and get out of my sight. Davern rubbed his jaw, glaring at Lyra. She's insane. I told you she was unstable. The stranger released her abruptly, and Lyra stumbled forward, breathing hard. Her hand throbbed where she'd torn it on the gate. Her chest felt like it was caving in. Greaves stepped forward, adjusting his spectacles. Miss Ashvale, if you'd just provide the access codes, we can all move on with our lives. She stared at him, at Davern, at the stranger who clearly didn't give a damn about any of this, and then she laughed. It came out sharp and broken, but she couldn't stop it. You think I'm going to help you? She said. After this? You don't have a choice, Greaves said coolly. You're about to marry Lord Cadric. Once that happens, everything you own becomes his property anyway. You might as well hand it over now and save yourself the trouble. Or, Davern added, you go back to your father, tell him you got cold feet, and we all pretend this never happened. Either way, you lose. Lyra looked at the three of them. These men who thought they had her cornered, who thought she was just another foolish girl with no options. And in that moment, she realized something. They were right. She had no options. Not the ones they thought, anyway. If she went back, her father would lock her in a room until the ceremony. If she ran alone, she had no money, no allies, no way to survive in a world built to chew up women like her and spit them out. But there was one thing she still controlled, herself. She turned on her heel and walked away. Where are you going? Davern called after her. She didn't answer. She walked out of the alley, past the chapel, into the narrow streets of the lower city where the taverns spilled light and noise into the night. Her heart was pounding, her thoughts racing, but her steps were steady. She had no plan, no destination, but she sure as hell wasn't going back. The lower city was a different world. Up on the cliffs, everything was marble and manners. Down here, it was mud and sweat and the smell of cheap ale. Lyra had only been to this part of town a handful of times, always with an escort, always hurrying through like the poverty might be contagious. Now she walked alone in a torn wedding dress, and no one gave her a second glance. She stopped in front of a tavern called the Broken Anchor. Inside she could hear laughter, shouting, the clash of mugs. It sounded chaotic, dangerous, perfect. She pushed open the door. The noise hit her like a wave. The place was packed, sailors, merchants, drifters, all crowded around tables slick with spilled beer. A fire roared in the hearth, casting flickering shadows across the walls. No one looked up when she entered. Lyra made her way to the bar, her hands still shaking. The bartender, a woman with arms like tree trunks and a scar across her cheek, gave her a long, measuring look. You lost, girl? No, Lyra said. I need a drink. The woman snorted. You need a lot more than that, by the look of you, but I'll start you with whiskey. She poured a shot and slid it across the bar. Lyra downed it in one burning gulp. It didn't help. She set the glass down and stared at her reflection in the grimy mirror behind the bar. Her hair was a mess. Her dress was ruined. There was blood on her hands. She looked like someone who'd lost everything, because she had. Another, she said. The bartender poured. Rough night? Lyra laughed bitterly. You could say that. Man trouble? Something like that. The bartender leaned against the counter, studying her. Let me guess. He promised you the world, then took everything you had and left you holding nothing. Lyra's throat tightened. How did you know? Because that's what they do, sweetheart. Men like that. They find girls like you, smart, pretty, desperate for something different, and they use you. She shook her head. Tale as old as time. I should have known better, Lyra whispered. Maybe. Or maybe he was just a good liar. The bartender refilled her glass. Either way, you're here now. Question is, what are you going to do about it? Lyra stared down at the whiskey. What was she going to do? She couldn't go back. She couldn't run. She had no money, no allies, no way forward. Unless an idea flickered at the edge of her mind. Wild, reckless, probably insane, but it was something. She downed the second shot, slammed the glass on the bar, and stood up. Thanks for the drink, she said. The bartender raised an eyebrow. Where are you going? Lyra didn't answer. She walked back out into the street, her heart pounding, her mind racing. If she was going to survive this, she needed power, real power, the kind that couldn't be taken away. And there was only one way to get it. She scanned the street, her eyes landing on a figure leaning against the wall of a nearby building. A man in dark clothing, his face shadowed by the brim of a traveler's hat. He was watching the crowd with the kind of stillness that said he didn't belong here. Lyra took a breath. Then she walked straight up to him. "I need your help," she said. The man didn't move. "I don't help anyone. I'll pay you." "With what?" His voice was low, edged with something cold. "Everything I have." That got his attention. He tilted his head, and for the first time, she saw his face. Sharp features, dark eyes, a jaw like cut stone. He looked like someone who'd seen the worst the world had to offer and decided he didn't care. "You don't look like you have much," he said. "I have a title, property, a dowry." She swallowed hard. "I'll give it all to you, in exchange for one thing." "And what's that?" Lyra met his gaze, her voice steady despite the terror clawing at her insides. "Marry me." The silence stretched between them like a blade. The man stared at her, his expression unreadable in the dim light spilling from the tavern windows. Around them, the street continued its chaotic rhythm, drunken laughter, the clatter of cartwheels, someone singing off-key in the distance. But in the space between Lyra and the stranger, everything had gone still. "You're joking," he said finally. "Do I look like I'm joking?" Lyra shot back, her voice sharper than she intended. Her hands were still trembling, but she locked her knees to keep from swaying. The whiskey was hitting her system now, making everything feel both more and less real at the same time. The man straightened, pushing off from the wall. He was taller than she'd realized, broad-shouldered, built like someone who'd spent his life doing things that required strength rather than asking for it. He moved with a kind of controlled economy, every gesture deliberate. "Let me get this straight," he said slowly. "You just walked up to a complete stranger in the worst part of the city in a torn wedding dress and proposed marriage." "Yes." "And you think I'm going to say yes because I'm offering you everything I own," Lyra said, forcing herself to hold his gaze. "A landed title, property in the northern provinces. A dowry worth more than you'd see in 10 lifetimes working whatever it is you do." His mouth curved slightly. Not quite a smile, more like he was watching something mildly entertaining. "You don't know what I do." "I don't care what you do." "That's a dangerous position to take." "I'm already in danger," Lyra said flatly. "What's one more risk?" He studied her for a long moment, his dark eyes cataloging every detail. The tear in her dress, the blood on her palm, the desperate set of her jaw. She felt exposed under that gaze, like he could see straight through to the panic clawing at her insides. "You're running from something," he said. "Aren't we all?" "Not like this." He tilted his head. "Who's after you? Father? Husband?" "Both, neither. It's complicated." "Most things are." He crossed his arms. "Here's what I see. A high-born girl who made a stupid choice, got burned, and now thinks marrying a stranger is somehow going to fix everything. That about cover it?" Lyra's face burned. "You don't know anything about me?" "I know desperation when I see it." His voice wasn't cruel, just matter-of-fact. "And I know that girls like you don't end up in places like this unless they've run out of every other option." "Then you understand why I'm asking." "Oh, I understand," he said. "What I don't understand is why you think I'd be stupid enough to get involved." Something cracked inside her chest. She'd been so certain, so focused on this wild, reckless plan, that she hadn't actually considered he might just walk away, that she'd end up right back where she started, with nothing and no one. "Please," she whispered, and hated herself for it. The man's expression didn't change. "Go home, girl. Whatever mess you're in, dragging me into it won't help." He turned to leave. Lyra's hand shot out, grabbing his arm. "Wait!" He moved so fast she didn't even see it. One second she was reaching for him, the next her wrist was pinned against the wall beside her head, his body blocking hers, his free hand braced against the stone. She gasped, more from shock than pain. "Don't," he said quietly, his voice low and edged with warning. "Touch me without permission." Her heart hammered against her ribs. Up close she could see the details she'd missed before. The scar cutting through his left eyebrow, the faint stubble along his jaw, the way his pupils had blown wide in the dark. He smelled like leather and cold air and something sharper, almost metallic. "I'm sorry," she breathed. I don't have anywhere else to go." "Not my problem." "I know, but—" She swallowed hard, her throat tight. "If you walk away, I'm dead. Maybe not tonight, maybe not tomorrow, but soon. My father will drag me back, and he'll marry me off to a man who'll break me just because he can. And there's nothing I can do to stop it. Unless you bind yourself to someone else first," the stranger finished. His gaze dropped to her throat, then lower, and she realized he was looking at the hollow at the base of her neck, the place where a bonding mark would appear if she were claimed by an alpha. She went very still. "You know what I am," he said. It wasn't a question. Lyra nodded slowly. She'd suspected, but now she was certain. The way he moved, the way the crowd in the street seemed to unconsciously part around him, the sheer presence he carried, like gravity bent differently in his vicinity. Alpha. In the Northern Territories, alphas were rare, dangerous. They didn't follow the same rules as everyone else, couldn't be controlled by laws or titles or social niceties. They operated on instinct and power, and when they bonded, it was absolute, primal, unbreakable, which made them either the best protection in the world or the worst mistake you could ever make. "I know," she said quietly. "And you still want this?" "I don't want anything," Lyra said, her voice shaking. "But I need to survive. And right now, you're the only option I have." The stranger held her there for another heartbeat, his grip firm, but not painful. Then he released her and stepped back. "You're insane," he said. "Probably." He scrubbed a hand over his face, exhaling hard. For the first time, he looked less like a predator and more like a man trying to decide if he was about to make the worst decision of his life. "If we do this," he said slowly, "it's not a game. You understand that? A bond isn't a marriage contract you can dissolve when it's convenient. It's permanent, irreversible. You'll carry my mark for the rest of your life, and every alpha in 100 miles will know you're claimed. I know. And you'll belong to me, legally, physically. Every law in this territory says so." Lyra's stomach twisted, but she forced herself to nod. "I understand." "Do you?" He stepped closer again, his voice dropping. "Because once it's done, there's no going back. Your father can't touch you. Your betrothed can't touch you. But I can. Anytime I want. And there's not a damn thing you can do about it." She met his eyes, even though every instinct screamed at her to look away. "Then don't." "Don't what?" "Don't hurt me." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "You want honesty? Fine. I'm terrified. I don't know you. I don't trust you. But I trust you more than I trust the men who think they already own me. So if you're trying to scare me into changing my mind, it's not going to work. I'm already scared. I just don't have the luxury of letting it stop me." The stranger stared at her, something shifting behind his eyes. Surprise, maybe, or recognition. "What's your name?" he asked. "Lyra. Lyra Ashvale." His jaw tightened slightly. "Ashvale, Northern Cliffs, your father's Gareth Ashvale. You know him?" "I know of him." The stranger's voice went flat. "Merchant lord. Gambles too much, drinks too much, married his daughters off to cover his debts. You're the youngest, aren't you? The one who was supposed to marry Cadric Morven." Lyra blinked. "How do you—" "Because Morven's been bragging about it for weeks. Told half the territory he'd finally landed himself a young bride with a fat dowry." The stranger's mouth twisted. "Didn't mention she was running through the streets in a wedding dress, begging strangers for help." Heat flooded her face. "I wasn't begging—" "Yeah, you were." He said it without malice, just stating a fact. "And now I'm stuck deciding whether to walk away and let you hang yourself, or get dragged into whatever nightmare you're running from." I told you I'll pay." "I don't want your money," he interrupted. "If I do this, it's not for your dowry or your land or whatever else you think you're offering. It's because—" He stopped, his jaw working like he was chewing on words he didn't want to say. "It's because I've seen what men like Cadric Morven do to women. And I don't feel like having that on my conscience tonight." Lyra's breath caught. "So you'll do it?" "I didn't say that." "But—" "I said I don't want it on my conscience. That doesn't mean I'm an idiot." He crossed his arms again. You want a bond? Fine. But we do it my way. My terms. And you don't get to back out halfway through because you suddenly realize what you've agreed to. What are your terms? The stranger hesitated, then reached into his coat and pulled out a small knife, plain steel, well used. He held it between them like an offering. Blood bond, he said. Fastest way. Cleanest. You cut your palm, I cut mine, we bind it together and speak the words. 30 seconds, and it's done. Lyra stared at the blade. Her hand was already bleeding from the gate, the cut still wet and stinging. The idea of opening it further made her stomach turn. What words? She asked. The old ones. You claim me as your alpha. I claim you as my mate. Witnessed by the moon and the stars and whatever else is listening. His voice was steady, almost clinical. Once it's done, the bond takes hold. You'll feel it within the hour, and then there's no going back. What will I feel? Like you're tethered to me. Like I'm always there, even when I'm not. Some people say it's comforting, others say it's suffocating. He shrugged. Depends on the bond. Depends on the people. Lyra swallowed hard. And you? What will you feel? The stranger's gaze flicked over her, assessing. Same thing, plus the instinct to protect you, to keep you alive. It's not a choice, it's just what happens. The alpha in me won't tolerate threats to you, even if I wanted to ignore it. I couldn't. That doesn't sound so bad. It's not bad. It's just absolute. He held the knife steady. So, last chance. You walk away now and we both forget this conversation ever happened. Or you do this, and you're mine. Permanently. What's it going to be? Lyra looked at the knife, at the stranger, at the dark street beyond where her father's men were probably already searching. She thought about Davern's laugh, about her father's cold eyes, about Cadric Morven's hands, and she made her choice. Do it, she said. The stranger didn't smile, didn't react at all, really. He just nodded once, flipped the knife, and pressed the blade to his own palm. Blood welled up immediately, dark and slick. He held the knife out to her. Lyra took it, her hand shaking. She pressed the blade to her already torn skin and dragged it across, deepening the cut. Pain flared bright and sharp, but she didn't flinch. Give me your hand, the stranger said. She did. He pressed their palms together, blood mixing, and the contact sent a jolt through her entire body, not painful, but present, like something had just locked into place. Repeat after me, he said, his voice low. I claim you as my alpha. I bind myself to you, blood to blood, soul to soul. What's mine is yours. What's yours is mine, witnessed by the stars. Lyra's voice shook, but she spoke the words clearly. I claim you as my alpha. I bind myself to you, blood to blood, soul to soul. What's mine is yours. What's yours is mine, witnessed by the stars. The stranger's grip tightened. His eyes locked on hers, and something in them shifted, something dark and ancient and utterly inhuman. I claim you as my mate, he said, his voice rougher now. I bind myself to you, blood to blood, soul to soul. What's mine is yours. What's yours is mine, witnessed by the stars. And anyone who tries to take you from me will answer to me. The air between them seemed to hum. Lyra felt it, the bond snapping into place like a chain wrapping around her ribs, pulling tight but not choking. It was strange, foreign, but not unwelcome. It's done, the stranger said quietly. He released her hand and Lyra staggered back, her vision swimming. She looked down at her palm. The cut was still there, still bleeding, but around it, faint, barely visible, was the beginning of a mark. Thin black lines like ink spreading under her skin. The bonding mark, proof that she was claimed. Oh, gods, she whispered. Bit late for second thoughts, the stranger said dryly. He pulled a strip of cloth from his coat and wrapped it around his own hand with practiced efficiency. Then he held out another piece to her. She took it numbly, winding it around her palm. Her whole body felt strange, too hot, too tight, like her skin didn't quite fit anymore. What happens now? She asked. The stranger looked past her, his expression hardening. Now we get out of here. Because unless I'm mistaken, your father's men just turned onto this street. Lyra spun around. Three figures were moving toward them from the far end of the alley, torches in hand. She recognized the lead man immediately, Captain Werewo, her father's head of guard. Tall, brutal, loyal to a fault. "There," Werewo shouted, pointing. "I see her!" "Run," the stranger said. "What?" He grabbed her wrist and yanked her into motion. "I said run!" They bolted down the street, Lyra's torn dress tangling around her legs as she struggled to keep up. Behind them, she could hear Werewo shouting orders, boots pounding on cobblestones. "This way," the stranger hissed, pulling her left into a narrow passageway between two buildings. The walls pressed in on either side, so close she had to turn sideways to fit. "I can't," she gasped. "You can. Move." They burst out the other side into a wider street, this one crowded with late-night merchants and dock workers. The stranger didn't slow down. He wove through the crowd with the ease of someone who knew exactly where he was going, dragging Lyra behind him. She risked a glance back. Werewo and his men were still coming, pushing people aside, their faces set with grim determination. "They're going to catch us," she panted. "Not if you shut up and keep moving." They turned another corner, then another. Lyra had completely lost her bearings, had no idea where they were or which direction they were heading. All she could do was trust this stranger, this man she'd just bound herself to, and hope he had some kind of plan. Finally, he pulled her through a doorway into a building that smelled like salt and fish. A warehouse, maybe, or a dockside storage facility. It was dark inside, the only light coming from cracks in the roof. The stranger released her wrist and moved to the door, peering out into the street. Lyra bent over, hands on her knees, trying to catch her breath. Her lungs burned. Her legs felt like they were made of wet rope. "Are they—" she started. "Quiet," the stranger said sharply. She bit her tongue. Outside, she could hear Werewo's voice, distant but clear. "Check the warehouses. She can't have gone far." Footsteps, closer now. The stranger cursed under his breath. He grabbed Lyra's arm and pulled her deeper into the building, into a corner where old fishing nets were piled high. He pushed her down behind them, then crouched beside her, his body tense. "Don't move," he whispered. "Don't breathe loud. Don't do anything." Lyra nodded, her heart hammering so hard she was sure Werewo would hear it from the street. The door creaked open. Torchlight spilled across the floor, casting long shadows. Werewo stepped inside, followed by two of his men. They moved slowly, methodically, checking every corner. Lyra pressed herself as flat as she could against the wall, the stranger's body blocking hers. She could feel the heat of him, the tension radiating off him in waves. His hand was on the knife at his belt, ready. One of Werewo's men walked past their hiding spot, so close Lyra could have reached out and touched his boot. He paused. Lyra's breath stopped. Then he turned and walked back toward the door. "Nothing here, Captain." "Check the back," Werewo ordered. The men moved deeper into the warehouse, their torches casting wild, flickering light. The stranger leaned close, his mouth almost touching Lyra's ear. "When I say go, we move. Straight out the door, hard left. Don't stop until I tell you. Understand?" She nodded. He watched the guards, his body coiled like a spring. Werewo turned his back. "Go," the stranger breathed. They moved as one, slipping out from behind the nets and sprinting for the door. Lyra's dress caught on something. She heard fabric tear, but she didn't stop. They hit the street at full speed, the stranger pulling her left just like he'd said. Behind them, someone shouted, "There, stop!" But they were already gone, disappearing into the maze of streets and alleys, the night swallowing them whole. They ran until Lyra's legs gave out. She stumbled, nearly went down, but the stranger caught her and hauled her upright. They were somewhere near the docks now. She could hear the creak of ships, smell the brine-thick air. "I can't," she gasped. "I can't keep— You don't have to." The stranger pulled her toward a darkened building at the edge of the wharf. He kicked the door open. It was already half rotted off its hinges, and dragged her inside. It was some kind of abandoned customs house, empty except for broken crates and rat droppings. Not exactly welcoming. But it was shelter. The stranger released her and moved to the window, watching the street. Lyra collapsed against the wall, sliding down until she was sitting on the filthy floor. Her whole body was shaking. Her lungs felt like they were on fire. "Are they still following us?" she asked. "Not yet." The stranger didn't turn around. "But they will be. Your father's not going to give up that easily." "What do we do?" "We wait," Until morning, at least. Then we figure out our next move. Lyra closed her eyes, trying to process everything that had just happened. An hour ago, she'd been standing in her room staring at herself in a wedding dress. Now she was bound to a stranger, hiding in a ruin, being hunted by her own family. It was insane. It was terrifying. But she was still alive. "I don't even know your name," she said quietly. The stranger finally looked at her. In the dim light filtering through the broken windows, his face was all hard angles and shadows. "Ronan," he said. "Just Ronan? For now." Lyra wanted to ask what that meant, but exhaustion was crashing over her in waves. She leaned her head back against the wall, her eyes drifting shut. "Thank you," she whispered. "Don't thank me yet," Ronan said, his voice flat. "You have no idea what you just signed up for." He was probably right. But as Lyra sat there in the dark, feeling the strange new weight of the bond settling into her bones, she couldn't bring herself to regret it. Not yet, anyway. Outside, the city moved on, indifferent to the chaos of one girl's desperate choice. But somewhere in the distance, church bells began to toll. Midnight, the wedding hour, and Lyra Ashvale was nowhere near the altar. Lyra didn't sleep. She sat with her back against the damp wall, listening to the rats scuttle through the debris, watching Ronan's silhouette at the window. He hadn't moved in over an hour, just stood there, perfectly still, like a statue carved from stone and shadow. The bond hummed between them, a constant presence she couldn't ignore. It felt like a rope tied around her ribs, pulling gently but insistently toward him. Not painful, just there, reminding her with every breath that she wasn't alone anymore. Whether that was a comfort or a trap, she hadn't decided yet. Dawn came slowly, gray light seeping through the broken roof. Lyra's body ached from sitting on the cold floor, her dress was filthy beyond repair, and her hand throbbed under the makeshift bandage. She looked like something that had crawled out of the sea and given up halfway to shore. Ronan finally moved, turning from the window. In the pale morning light, she got her first clear look at him. Dark hair, longer than was fashionable, tied back with a leather cord. Sharp features that might have been handsome if they weren't so severe. Eyes the color of winter storms. He looked like he was in his late 20s, maybe early 30s, and carried himself like someone who'd survived things that would have killed softer men. "We need to move," he said. Lyra pushed herself to her feet, wincing as her joints protested. "Where?" "Somewhere public. Crowded. Your father's men won't try anything if there are witnesses." "And then what?" "Then we figure out what the hell we're going to do with you." The casual dismissal in his tone stung, but Lyra bit back the retort. She'd gotten what she wanted: protection, escape. She didn't get to complain about the packaging. They slipped out into the early morning streets. The docks were already coming alive. Fishermen hauling in their night catches, merchants setting up stalls, dock workers shouting instructions over the screech of gulls. The smell of salt and fish guts was overwhelming. Ronan moved through the crowd like he belonged there, which Lyra supposed he probably did. She, on the other hand, stuck out like a pearl in mud. Torn wedding dress, tangled hair, barefoot now because she'd lost her shoes somewhere during the chase. People stared. Some pointed. A few laughed. "Can we please find me some clothes?" Lyra muttered. "Not yet," Ronan said without looking back. "First we eat, then we deal with the rest." He led her to a corner food stall where an old woman was frying something that smelled like heaven and looked like it might kill her. Ronan exchanged a few words and some coins, and the woman handed over 2 steaming parcels wrapped in paper. "Eat," he said, shoving one at Lyra. She unwrapped it carefully. Some kind of fried fish and potatoes, greasy and probably terrible for her, but her stomach growled so loudly she didn't care. She took a bite and nearly moaned. It was the best thing she'd ever tasted. Ronan watched her with something that might have been amusement. "When's the last time you ate?" "Yesterday morning." She took another bite, burning her tongue and not caring. "My mother said I needed to fit the dress." "Your mother sounds delightful." "She's a nightmare." Lyra swallowed, wiping grease from her chin with the back of her hand. "But she's practical. In her world, a daughter who can't land a husband is a waste of resources." "And you couldn't land one?" "I landed several. I just didn't want any of them." Ronan made a non-committal sound and finished his own food in silence. When they were done, he led her away from the docks. Up into the merchant district where the buildings were cleaner and the people better dressed. Where are we going? Lyra asked. You'll see. They stopped in front of a shop with expensive-looking dresses displayed in the window. Lyra stared at it, then at Ronan. I thought you said we didn't have time for clothes. I said not yet. Now it's yet. He opened the door and gestured for her to go in. The shop was small but well-appointed, with bolts of fabric stacked along the walls and finished garments hanging from hooks. A woman emerged from the back, middle-aged, sharp-eyed, dressed in practical but well-made clothing. She took one look at Lyra and raised an eyebrow. Rough night. You could say that, Ronan said. She needs something simple, durable, nothing that screams runaway bride. The woman's other eyebrow joined the first. I see. Well, I think I have just the thing. 20 minutes later, Lyra stood in front of a mirror wearing a plain gray dress with a high collar and long sleeves. It was nothing like the elaborate gown she'd grown up in. No embroidery, no jewels, no unnecessary flourishes, just sturdy fabric cut to fit. She barely recognized herself. Better, Ronan said from behind her. The shopkeeper bundled up the wedding dress without comment and handed Lyra a pair of worn boots. These should fit. They're not pretty, but they'll last. Lyra pulled them on, lacing them tight. They were heavy and stiff, but her feet already felt better. Ronan paid, more than the clothes were worth, Lyra suspected, and they left the shop. Thank you, Lyra said quietly. Don't thank me. You'll be paying me back eventually. With what? You said you didn't want my money. I don't want your dowry, but you're going to work off what I spend on you. He glanced at her. You do know how to work, don't you? Lyra bristled. I'm not useless. That wasn't an answer. I can read, write, do figures. I speak 3 languages. I can manage a household, plan a menu, organize staff. Great. None of that's useful here. Ronan steered her down another street. Can you clean, cook, mend clothes, handle yourself in a fight? Lyra's jaw tightened. No. Then you're going to learn. Before she could respond, Ronan stopped abruptly. His whole body went tense, his hand moving to the knife at his belt. What? Lyra started. Be quiet, he said, his voice low and hard. She looked around, trying to see what had spooked him. The street seemed normal enough, people going about their business, vendors calling out their wares. Then she saw them. 4 men, moving through the crowd with purpose. They weren't dressed like city guards or her father's household men. These were rougher, mercenaries maybe, or hired muscle, and they were looking directly at Ronan. Friends of yours? Lyra whispered. No. Ronan's hand stayed on the knife. Stay behind me. The men approached, fanning out to block their path. The leader, a broad-shouldered man with a broken nose and scarred knuckles, grinned unpleasantly. Ronan Valcrest, he said. Been a while. Lyra's breath caught. Valcrest. That name, she knew that name. Everyone in the Northern Territories knew that name. The royal family. Cray, Ronan said flatly. Still picking fights you can't win? Cray's grin widened. Not picking a fight, just delivering a message. Your brother wants to see you. My brother can go to hell. Funny, he said you'd say that. Cray's eyes slid to Lyra. And who's this? New pet? Ronan's voice dropped into something cold and dangerous. Careful. Just curious. She's wearing your mark. We can all smell it. Didn't think you were the bonding type. I'm not, Ronan said. But what I do is none of your concern. It is when it involves the crown. Cray took a step closer. King Aldrich's calling all alphas to court. Royal summons. You've been avoiding it for months, but now... He gestured at Lyra. Now you've bonded, which means she has to be presented. Officially. Lyra's stomach dropped. Presented? To the court, Cray said, his grin turning nasty. Every bonded alpha has to register their mate with the crown. It's law, especially when the alpha's a prince. The world tilted sideways. Lyra stared at Ronan, her mind refusing to process what she'd just heard. Prince? Ronan didn't look at her. His eyes stayed locked on Cray. I'm not a prince. I abdicated. Doesn't matter. Blood's blood. And your brother's not giving you a choice anymore. Cray jerked his head toward his men. You can come willingly, or we can drag you. Either way, you're coming. Try it, Ronan said quietly. Kray's hand moved to his sword. Everything happened at once. Ronan moved first, faster than Lyra could track, his knife flashing out to deflect Kray's blade. Metal screamed against metal. The other three men rushed in, and suddenly the street erupted into chaos. Lyra stumbled backward, pressing against the wall as Ronan fought. He moved like violence incarnate. Every strike precise, every movement economical. One man went down with a knife in his shoulder. Another collapsed, clutching his ribs. But Kray was good, better than the others. He and Ronan circled each other, blades dancing, neither giving ground. You always were stubborn, Kray growled. And you always were slow, Ronan shot back. He feinted left, then drove his knife upward. Kray barely dodged, the blade slicing across his cheek. Blood welled up, dark and wet. Kray snarled and lunged. Ronan caught his wrist, twisted, and drove his knee into Kray's gut. The bigger man went down hard, gasping for air. Ronan stood over him, breathing hard, knife pressed to Kray's throat. Tell my brother, he said quietly, that I'll come to court when I'm ready. Not before. And if he sends more dogs after me, I'll send them back in pieces. Understand? Kray spat blood. You can't hide forever. I'm not hiding. I'm choosing. Ronan stepped back, lowering the knife. Now get out of my sight. Kray climbed to his feet, motioning for his men to retreat. They backed away slowly, eyes never leaving Ronan. He's going to make you regret this, Kray said. He can try. The mercenaries disappeared into the crowd, leaving Ronan and Lyra alone in the sudden silence. Lyra's legs felt like water. She slid down the wall, her mind reeling. You're a prince, she whispered. Ronan sheathed his knife and turned to her. His expression was unreadable. I was. Not anymore. That's not how royalty works. It is if you walk away. He crouched in front of her, his voice low. Listen to me. What I was, what I came from, it doesn't matter. I left that world behind years ago. I'm not a prince. I'm not part of that court. I'm just the second son of King Aldrich Valacrest, Lyra finished. Her voice sounded hollow even to her own ears. One of the most powerful alphas in the realm, and I just bound myself to you without even knowing your full name. Would it have changed your decision? She wanted to say yes, wanted to be angry, but the truth was she didn't know. She'd been desperate, terrified, and now she was bonded to royalty. This changes everything, she said quietly. No, it doesn't. Ronan stood, offering her his hand. The bond is what it is. My bloodline doesn't make it stronger or weaker. You're still under my protection. That hasn't changed. Lyra stared at his hand. Then she took it, letting him pull her to her feet. Your brother summoned you, she said. What are you going to do? Ignore him, like I've been doing for the past 3 years. Can you do that? Just ignore a royal summons? I can do whatever I want. Ronan's voice was hard. Aldrich doesn't own me. Not anymore. But even as he said it, Lyra saw the tension in his shoulders, the tightness around his eyes. He was trying to sound confident, but something about this clearly bothered him more than he wanted to admit. Why did you leave? She asked. That's not your concern. I think it is. I'm bonded to you now. Whatever you're running from, it's my problem too. Ronan's jaw tightened. For a moment she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he exhaled hard, scrubbing a hand over his face. I left because I didn't want to be part of what my family is, he said quietly. The court, the politics, the endless games of power and manipulation. My brother, King Aldrich, he's good at it, thrives on it. But I'm not. And when I refused to play along, when I made it clear I'd rather walk away than become another piece on his board, he stopped, his expression darkening. Let's just say he didn't take it well. So you abdicated. So I disappeared. Ronan started walking again, and Lyra fell into step beside him. Changed my name, kept my head down. Built a life that had nothing to do with crowns or thrones or any of that bullshit. And now? Now I'm stuck between two worlds, he said bitterly, because you showed up in a torn wedding dress and offered me everything you had, and I was stupid enough to say yes. The words stung more than Lyra expected. I didn't know. I know, and I'm not blaming you. I'm just... He stopped in the middle of the street, turning to face her. I'm just trying to figure out what the hell we do now, because Kray was right about one thing. If I've bonded, the crown has to be notified. It's law. And if I don't show up voluntarily, Aldrich will send people who won't take no for an answer. Lyra's stomach twisted. So we go to court. I go to court. You stay hidden. That's not how this works. If I'm your mate, you are. Then I have to be presented too. Right? Ronan didn't answer, which was answer enough. Lyra took a breath, trying to steady herself. Okay, so we go together. We present the bond, we deal with your brother. And then what? Then we hope he doesn't decide to use you as leverage against me. The fear in his voice was so unexpected, so raw, that Lyra froze. He'd do that? She whispered. He's done worse. Ronan's expression went flat. Aldrich doesn't forgive, and he doesn't forget. If he sees you as a weakness, as a way to control me, he'll exploit it, without hesitation. Then why did you bond me? The words came out sharper than she intended. If you knew this would happen, why didn't you just walk away? Ronan met her eyes, and for the first time, she saw something vulnerable beneath the hard exterior. Because I'm an idiot, he said quietly, and because when I looked at you standing there in that alley, desperate and terrified and still willing to fight, I saw someone who deserved better than what the world was giving her, and I couldn't walk away from that. Lyra's throat tightened. She didn't know what to say to that, didn't know if there was anything to say. Before she could respond, a new voice cut through the air. Well, isn't this touching? Lyra spun around. Her father stood in the end of the street, flanked by a dozen armed men. Lord Gareth Ashvale looked exactly as he always did, cold, composed, utterly in control. But there was something different in his eyes now, something darker. Fury. Hello, daughter, he said softly. I believe we have some things to discuss. Ronan stepped in front of Lyra, his hand back on his knife. She's not going with you. Gareth's smile was thin and cruel. I'm afraid you don't have a choice in the matter. Lyra is still my daughter, still under my authority, and she's caused quite a bit of trouble over the past 12 hours. She's bonded, Ronan said flatly. That makes her mine, not yours. Any claim you had ended the moment the bond took hold. Oh, I'm aware of the bond. Gareth's eyes flicked to Lyra, and she saw the disgust there. I can smell it from here. My daughter, bound to some low-born drifter like a common whore. Ronan moved so fast Lyra didn't even see it. One second he was standing beside her, the next he had Gareth by the throat, pinned against the nearest wall. Say that again, Ronan said, his voice deadly quiet. I dare you. The guards drew their weapons, but none of them moved. They knew what Ronan was, knew what he could do. Gareth's face turned red, his hand scrabbling at Ronan's grip. You're making a mistake. The only mistake I'm making is not killing you right here. Ronan's eyes had gone completely black, full alpha, no humanity left. But I'm feeling generous, so I'm going to give you one chance to walk away. Take your men, leave, and don't come near her again. She's my daughter. She's my mate. Ronan's voice dropped into a growl that made Lyra's bones vibrate. And if you ever threaten her again, I will tear you apart, slowly. Do you understand? Gareth's eyes were bulging now, his face purple. Ronan, Lyra said quietly, let him go. Not until he agrees. He can't agree if he's dead. Ronan held Gareth for another long moment. Then he released him abruptly, stepping back. Gareth collapsed, gasping for air. His guards rushed forward, but he waved them off, coughing violently. When he finally looked up, there was murder in his eyes. You have no idea, he rasped, what you've just done. I know exactly what I've done, Ronan said. I've made it clear that Lyra is under my protection, and anyone who tries to take her from me will regret it. Gareth straightened slowly, his hand going to his throat. You think a bond protects her? You think it matters? He laughed, a dry, bitter sound. You're not the only one with power, boy. Lord Cadric Morven is owed a bride. He paid for her, contracted for her, and when he finds out she's run off with some nobody, I'm not a nobody, Ronan said quietly. Something in his tone made Gareth pause. Ronan stepped forward, his posture shifting into something Lyra had never seen before. Regal, commanding, utterly authoritative. My name is Ronan Valcrest, he said, each word falling like a hammer. second son of King Aldrich Valacrest, prince of the Northern Realm, and the woman standing behind me is my bonded mate, which makes her a princess, whether you like it or not." The color drained from Gareth's face. The guards looked at each other, uncertainty flickering across their features, and Lyra felt the world shift beneath her feet one more time. "So here's what's going to happen," Ronan continued, his voice hard as iron. "You're going to take your men and leave. You're going to tell Lord Cadric Morven that the contract is void, and you're going to pray that I never see you again, because the next time you come near Lyra, I won't be this merciful. Are we clear?" Gareth opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. You can't. I just did." Ronan's smile was all teeth. "Now get out of my sight before I change my mind about letting you live." For a long moment, no one moved. Then Gareth jerked his head at his men, and they began to retreat. Slowly at first, then faster, until they were nearly running. Gareth was the last to leave. He looked at Lyra one final time, his expression a mixture of rage and something that might have been fear. "This isn't over," he said. "Yeah," Ronan said, "it is." Gareth turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. The street fell silent. Lyra stood frozen, her mind struggling to catch up with everything that had just happened. Ronan he'd just claimed her publicly, announced his identity, challenged her father in an entire contract in front of witnesses. There was no going back from this, no hiding, no pretending it never happened. She was bound to a prince, and everyone was about to know it. The crowd that had gathered during the confrontation began to disperse, people whispering furiously as they hurried away. Lyra could feel their eyes on her, curious, shocked, hungry for gossip. By nightfall, the entire city would know. By tomorrow, the news would spread across the northern territories like wildfire. Lyra Ashvale, runaway bride, was now Princess Lyra Valacrest. The thought made her want to vomit. "We need to move," Ronan said, his voice back to its usual flat tone. The regal authority he'd wielded moments ago had vanished like smoke, leaving only the guarded stranger she'd bound herself to. "Where?" Lyra's voice came out steadier than she felt. "Somewhere we can't be cornered." He started walking, not waiting to see if she'd follow. She did, because what choice did she have? They moved through the streets in tense silence, Ronan's hand never straying far from his knife. Lyra's mind was racing, trying to process everything. Her father's face when Ronan had revealed his identity. The fear in those guards' eyes. The way the entire confrontation had shifted in an instant. Power. That's what had changed. Not the bond, not logic, not mercy, just raw, undeniable power. And now she was tied to it. "You didn't have to do that," she said finally. Ronan didn't slow down. "Do what?" "Tell them who you were. You could have let me go back. Could have dissolved the bond somehow." "There is no dissolving a bond." He turned down a narrow alley, checking behind them before continuing. "What's done is done. But you wanted to stay hidden. You said so yourself. Plans change." His jaw was tight. "Your father wasn't going to back off. Neither was Morven. The only way to make them leave you alone was to make it clear that taking you would mean going to war with the crown. So you sacrificed your freedom for mine." Ronan stopped abruptly, turning to face her. "Don't romanticize it." "I didn't sacrifice anything. I made a tactical decision. Your father's the type who respects power and nothing else, so I showed him power." He started walking again. Besides, it was going to come out eventually. Cray made sure of that. Lyra hurried to keep up. "What happens now?" "Now we go to court." "I thought you said—" "I said I didn't want to. I didn't say I had a choice." Ronan's voice was hard. "The moment I claimed you publicly, I forced Aldrich's hand. He'll demand we present ourselves within the week. If we don't show up, he'll send people. And this time, they won't be as polite as Cray. Your brother sounds like a piece of work. He's a king. It comes with the territory." Ronan led her through another maze of streets until they reached a building that looked slightly less decrepit than the others. He knocked 3 times, paused, then knocked twice more. The door opened a crack. An eye appeared, scanning them both. Then the door swung wide. Inside was a tavern. Not fancy, but cleaner than the broken anchor. A handful of people sat at scattered tables, all of them looking like they'd rather not be noticed. The kind of place where people came to disappear. A woman behind the bar looked up as they entered. She was older, maybe 50, with gray-streaked hair and the build of someone who'd spent her life hauling barrels. Her eyes went to Ronan, then widened. "Well, hell," she said. "Didn't expect to see you again." "Hello, Mara," Ronan said. "Heard you got yourself bonded. Figured it was bullshit." Mara's eyes shifted to Lyra, assessing. "Guess I was wrong. We need a room, a few days, maybe longer." "You can pay?" Ronan dropped a handful of coins on the bar, more than enough, judging by Mara's raised eyebrows. "Upstairs. End of the hall. Don't cause trouble and we won't have a problem." Mara swept the coins into her apron. "Food's extra." "Oh, fine." Mara jerked her head toward the stairs. "Go on then. And Ronan, whatever mess you're in, keep it outside my door." "Always do?" They climbed the narrow staircase to the second floor. The room at the end of the hall was small, barely enough space for a bed, a chair, and a wash basin, but it had a lock on the door and a window with an actual shutter. Ronan closed the door behind them and threw the bolt. Lyra stood in the center of the room, suddenly aware of how close the space was. One bed, one room, and the bond humming between them like a living thing. "Take the bed," Ronan said, as if reading her thoughts. "I'll take the floor." "You don't have to." "I'm taking the floor." His tone left no room for argument. He moved to the window, checking the street below. "Get some rest. We leave for the capital in 2 days." 2 days? I thought you said a week." "I said Aldrich would demand we present ourselves within a week. I'm not giving him that long to prepare." Ronan turned back to her. "We show up early, on our terms, before he has time to set whatever trap he's planning." Lyra sank down onto the edge of the bed. "He's really that bad?" "Worse." Ronan pulled the chair over and sat, his posture tense. "Aldrich doesn't just play politics. He weaponizes them. Every conversation is a negotiation. Every gesture is calculated, and he never, ever forgives a slight." "And you slighted him by leaving." "I did more than that." Ronan's expression darkened. "I walked away from my inheritance, refused my duties, made it clear I wanted nothing to do with the crown. In Aldrich's eyes, that's not just rejection, it's betrayal." "So what does he want now?" "What he's always wanted, control." Ronan leaned back, his eyes distant. "He'll see you as leverage, a way to bring me back into the fold, and he'll use every tool at his disposal to make that happen. Can't we just refuse, tell him we're not interested in court politics?" "We can try." "But Aldrich doesn't take no for an answer." Ronan met her eyes. "You need to understand something, Lyra. The moment we walk into that throne room, you become a piece on the board. Your past, your family, your mistakes. Aldrich will know all of it, and he'll use it. Against you, against me, against anyone he needs to." Lyra's stomach twisted. "My father will tell him everything. Count on it. About Davern, about the wedding, about—" She stopped, her throat tight. "About how desperate you were when you found me," Ronan finished quietly. "Yeah, he'll know." Shame burned through her chest. "They'll think I'm pathetic. They'll think you're human, which in that court might as well be the same thing." Ronan stood, moving back to the window. "But here's what they won't know. They won't know how you fought back, how you made a choice that saved your own life, how you stood in an alley and refused to go quietly." He glanced at her. "They'll see a scared girl in a torn dress. I saw someone with enough spine to survive." The words hit harder than Lyra expected. She looked down at her hands, at the faint mark on her palm where the bond had taken hold. "I'm still scared," she admitted. "Good. Fear keeps you sharp." Ronan turned fully to face her. "Listen to me. When we get to court, you don't apologize. You don't explain. You don't justify. You walk in there like you made exactly the choice you meant to make, and anyone who questions it can go to hell. Understand?" Lyra nodded, even though her chest felt like it was caving in. "And one more thing," Ronan said, his voice softening slightly. "Whatever happens in that throne room, whatever Aldrich says or does, I won't let him hurt you. The bond makes that impossible. But you have to trust me. Can you do that?" Lyra met his eyes. She barely knew this man, didn't understand half of what drove him, but the bond thrummed between them, steady and sure, and somewhere beneath the fear she felt something else. Safety. "Yes," she said quietly. Ronan held her gaze for another moment, then nodded and turned back to the window. Lyra lay down on the bed, still wearing the gray dress, too exhausted to care. She closed her eyes and waited for sleep. It didn't come. The next 2 days passed in a blur of preparation and tension. Ronan spent most of his time either at the window or downstairs in the tavern, speaking in low tones with Mara and a few other people who came and went like ghosts. Lyra tried to make herself useful, but there wasn't much for her to do except wait and think and worry. On the morning of the third day, Ronan woke her before dawn. "Get up," he said. "We're leaving." Lyra pushed herself upright, her body aching from too many nights on a too thin mattress. "Now?" "Now." He handed her a bundle of clothing, better quality than the gray dress, though still simple. Dark blue fabric, practical cut, sturdy boots, and a cloak with a hood. "Where did you get these?" she asked. "Don't worry about it, just get dressed." She changed quickly, hyper-aware of Ronan standing on the other side of the thin door. When she emerged, he was waiting in the hall, already packed and ready. They left through the back entrance, slipping into the pre-dawn streets while the city was still half asleep. Ronan led her to the edge of town where a horse and cart waited, driven by a man who didn't ask questions. The journey to the capital took most of the day. Lyra sat in the back of the cart, watching the landscape roll past, farmland giving way to forest, forest giving way to hills. The northern territories were beautiful in a harsh, unforgiving way, all sharp edges and cold winds. Ronan sat beside the driver, his posture tense, his eyes constantly scanning the road ahead. They didn't speak. By late afternoon, the capital came into view. Lyra had never seen it before. Her family's estate was too far north, too isolated. But she'd heard stories. The great city of Valacrest, seat of the Northern Crown, built on the ruins of an ancient fortress. It was bigger than she'd imagined, walls that seemed to touch the sky, towers crowned with iron and stone, and at the center, rising above everything else, the palace itself. A sprawling mass of gray stone and dark windows that looked less like a home and more like a threat. "That's where we're going?" Lyra whispered. "That's where we're going," Ronan confirmed. The cart rolled through the city gates. Guards stopped them briefly, but when Ronan pulled back his hood and showed his face, they stepped aside immediately. No questions, just wide eyes and hastily muttered apologies. They made their way through the crowded streets to the palace gates. Here, more guards waited, but these ones looked less impressed. "State your business," one of them said. "Prince Ronan Valacrest, here to see the king," Ronan said flatly. The guard's expression didn't change. "The king is not receiving visitors today." "He'll receive me." "I have orders, Apo." "I don't care about your orders." Ronan's voice dropped into something cold and dangerous. "Go tell your king that his brother is here, with his bonded mate, to present themselves as required by law. And if he refuses to see us, I'll walk into that throne room anyway." The guard hesitated, clearly torn between protocol and self-preservation. Finally, he jerked his head at another guard, who hurried inside. They waited. 10 minutes later, the gate swung open. "His Majesty will see you," the first guard said stiffly. "Follow me." They were escorted through the palace corridors, endless hallways of stone and tapestry, servants scurrying out of their way, nobles pausing to stare. Lyra kept her hood up, her eyes down, trying to ignore the whispers that followed them. Finally, they stopped in front of a massive set of double doors. "The throne room," the guard said. "His Majesty is waiting." Ronan looked at Lyra. "Ready?" She wasn't, not even close. But she nodded anyway. The doors opened. The throne room was cavernous, high ceilings, stone pillars, windows that let in cold gray light. And at the far end, seated on a throne of black iron, was King Aldrich Valacrest. He looked like an older, harsher version of Ronan. Same dark hair, same sharp features, same piercing eyes. But where Ronan carried himself like a weapon, Aldrich carried himself like a kingdom. Absolute. Immovable. Terrifying. The room was filled with courtiers, dozens of them, all dressed in fine clothing, all watching with barely concealed curiosity. Ronan walked forward, his steps echoing on the stone floor. Lyra followed, her heart hammering. They stopped 10 feet from the throne. Aldrich studied them both in silence. Then his mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Well," he said, his voice carrying easily across the room. Look who finally decided to come home. Ronan's expression didn't change. I'm here to present my mate, as required by law, nothing more. Of course. Aldrich's eyes slid to Lyra. And this is her? The girl who's caused so much trouble? Lyra forced herself to meet his gaze. Up close, the king's eyes were the same color as Ronan's, but colder, empty of anything resembling warmth. Lyra Ashvale, Aldrich continued, daughter of Gareth Ashvale, betrothed to Lord Cadric Morven, who ran away from her own wedding and bound herself to my brother in a back alley like a common— Careful, Ronan said quietly. Aldrich's smile widened. Like a common refugee. That's what I was going to say. The courtiers murmured, a low ripple of amusement spreading through the room. Lyra's face burned, but she kept her chin up. Ronan had told her not to apologize, not to explain. So she didn't. Aldrich leaned forward slightly. Tell me, Miss Ashvale, do you have any idea what you've done? The alliances you've disrupted? The contracts you've broken? I know exactly what I've done, Lyra said, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. I chose freedom over a marriage that would have destroyed me, and I'd do it again. The room went silent. Aldrich's eyebrows rose. Bold words. But boldness doesn't erase consequences. Lord Morven is demanding compensation, your father's demanding justice, and the court is demanding an explanation. They can demand whatever they want, Lyra said. It doesn't change the fact that I'm bonded. Legally, permanently, which means I'm no longer anyone's property but my own. Actually, Aldrich said softly, it means you're Ronan's property. That's how the bond works, isn't it? Lyra opened her mouth to argue, but Ronan spoke first. She's my mate, he said, not my property. And anyone who tries to treat her as anything less will answer to me. Aldrich's smile didn't waver. How chivalrous. But I'm afraid your protective instincts don't change the political reality. You've bonded a woman who is contracted to another man. A powerful man, one who doesn't take kindly to being humiliated. Then he shouldn't have bought a bride like she was livestock, Ronan shot back. That's not how he sees it, and unfortunately his opinion matters. Aldrich stood, descending the steps from his throne. He moved with deliberate grace like a predator circling prey. Here's the situation. Lord Morven wants his contract honored, your father wants you returned, and I want my court to stop being a circus. What do you want us to do about it? Ronan asked. Simple. Dissolve the bond. Lyra's blood went cold. That's not possible, Ronan said flatly. Isn't it? Aldrich stopped a few feet away, his eyes locked on his brother. There are rituals, old magic. Painful, yes. Dangerous, certainly, but possible. No. It's the only way to restore order. Morven gets his bride, or at least his compensation. Your father gets his daughter back, and you— Aldrich's smile turned sharp. You get to go back to whatever hole you've been hiding in for the past 3 years. Ronan's hands clenched into fists. I said no. I'm not giving you a choice, brother. Yes, you are. Ronan stepped forward, his voice dropping into something deadly. Because if you try to force this, if you even think about breaking the bond, I will burn this entire court to the ground. And you know I can. The room went deathly quiet. Aldrich's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Recognition. Maybe even respect. You'd go to war, he said quietly, over a girl you barely know. Over my mate, Ronan corrected. Yeah, I would. Aldrich studied him for a long moment. Then he turned his gaze to Lyra. And you? Are you willing to let him destroy everything for your sake? Lyra's heart was pounding so hard she could barely hear her own thoughts. But somewhere beneath the fear, beneath the overwhelming pressure of the moment, she felt something else rising. Anger. You talk about me like I'm not standing right here, she said, her voice low. Like I'm some object to be negotiated over. But I'm not. I'm a person. I made a choice. A hard choice. And I'm not apologizing for it. She took a step forward, ignoring the shocked whispers from the courtiers. You want to restore order? Fine. Compensate Lord Morven for his investment. Tell my father his contract is void. But you don't get to dissolve my bond. You don't get to decide my future. Not you. Not anyone. Aldrich's eyes narrowed. You're very brave for someone with no power. I have more power than you think, Lyra said, because I'm bonded to a prince, which makes me, what did Ronan call it? A princess. And unless I'm mistaken, that means I have rights, legal standing, a voice in this court. Someone in the crowd gasped. Aldrich's smile vanished. She's right, Ronan said, moving to stand beside her. You can't dissolve the bond without her consent, and you can't force her consent without violating about a dozen laws. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to formally recognize the bond. You're going to grant Lyra her title, and you're going to make it very clear to Morven and anyone else that she's under royal protection. And if I refuse, Aldrich asked, then I take her and leave. Tonight. And you'll never see me again. Ronan's voice was hard. Your choice, brother. You can have me here where you can at least keep an eye on me, or you can have me out there, free to do whatever I want, with a very good reason to hate you. Aldrich stared at him. The entire room held its breath. Then slowly, the king began to laugh. It wasn't a pleasant sound, more bitter than amused, but it was genuine. You always were stubborn, Aldrich said finally. Fine, you win. The bond stands. Relief flooded through Lyra so violently she nearly swayed. But, Aldrich continued, his voice hardening, there are conditions. Of course there are, Ronan muttered. You want her recognized as a princess? Then she acts like one. That means residing at court, learning protocol, representing the crown. Aldrich's eyes locked on Lyra. Can you handle that, Miss Ashvale? Or should I say, Princess Lyra? Lyra swallowed hard. Every instinct screamed at her to refuse, to run, to get as far away from this place as possible. But if she did that, Aldrich would win, and everything she'd fought for would be for nothing. I can handle it, she said. Good. Aldrich turned back to Ronan. And you, if you're going to be here, you're going to be useful. I have tasks that need handling, problems that need solving. You do them, and I'll keep Morven and your father-in-law off your back. Ronan's jaw tightened. Fine. Then we have an agreement. Aldrich clapped his hands once, and the sound echoed through the chamber. Let it be known, Prince Ronan Valicrest has returned to court with his bonded mate, Lady Lyra Ashvale, who is hereby recognized as Princess Lyra Valicrest. The bond is sanctioned by the crown. Anyone who challenges it challenges me. The courtiers bowed, murmuring their acknowledgement. Aldrich walked back to his throne, settling into it with casual authority. You're dismissed. Rooms will be prepared for you. We'll discuss your duties tomorrow. Ronan took Lyra's arm and steered her toward the doors. They were halfway across the throne room when a voice called out, Princess Lyra! Lyra turned. A man was pushing through the crowd, middle-aged, expensively dressed, with the soft hands of someone who'd never done hard labor. Lord Cadric Morven. Lyra's stomach dropped. Morven stopped a few feet away, his eyes raking over her with undisguised disgust. So, this is the bride I paid for. Ronan stepped between them immediately. Walk away. I think I'm entitled to a conversation with the woman who humiliated me, Morven said coldly. You're not entitled to anything, Ronan said. Now move, before I make you. But Morven wasn't looking at Ronan anymore. He was looking past him, directly at Lyra. Did you really think you could run from me? He asked softly. Did you think binding yourself to some disgraced prince would save you? Lyra's hands shook, but she forced herself to speak. I didn't run from you. I ran from a future where I was nothing but a transaction. And now look at you, a princess. How convenient. Morven's smile was ugly. But titles don't change what you are. A coward, a whore. And everyone in this room knows it. Ronan moved so fast Lyra didn't even see the punch. 1 second Morven was standing, the next he was on the ground, blood pouring from his nose. The room erupted. Guards rushed forward. Courtiers gasped. Aldrich stood from his throne, his expression thunderous. But Ronan didn't care. He stood over Morven, his voice deadly calm. If you ever speak to my mate again, he said quietly, I will kill you, slowly. Do we understand each other? Morven stared up at him, blood dripping down his chin, fear finally flickering in his eyes. Yes, he whispered. Good. Ronan turned, took Lyra's hand, and walked out of the throne room without looking back. The doors slammed shut behind them. Lyra stood in the corridor, shaking, her mind reeling. Ronan pulled her into an alcove, away from prying eyes. "Are you all right?" he asked. She wanted to say yes, wanted to be strong. But the weight of everything, the confrontation, the court, Morven's words, crashed down on her all at once. "I don't know," she whispered. Ronan's expression softened slightly. He reached out, hesitated, then gently touched her shoulder. "You did good in there," he said quietly. "Better than good. You stood up to a king and didn't flinch. I was terrified." "I know, but you didn't show it, and that's what matters." He squeezed her shoulder once, then let go. "Come on, let's find somewhere you can breathe." They walked through the palace in silence until they found a small courtyard, empty except for a fountain and a few stone benches. Lyra sank down onto one of the benches, her legs finally giving out. Ronan sat beside her, leaving a careful distance between them. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we survive," Ronan said. "We play Aldrich's game. We stay visible. We make it clear to everyone that you're not going anywhere. And Morven? Morven's done. He won't risk coming after you again, not after what just happened." Ronan leaned back, his eyes on the sky. "You're safe now. As safe as anyone can be in this place." Lyra looked down at her hands. The bonding mark was fully visible now, dark lines wrapping around her palm like elegant chains. "I never wanted to be a princess," she said quietly. "I never wanted to be a prince," Ronan replied. "Guess we're both stuck with things we didn't choose." She laughed, a short, bitter sound. "At least we're stuck together." Ronan glanced at her, something unreadable in his expression. "Yeah," he said softly. "At least there's that." They sat in silence as the sun set over the capital, painting the sky in shades of red and gold. For the first time since that night in the alley, Lyra felt something other than fear. Not quite hope. Not yet. But maybe the beginning of it. The palace rooms they were given were far nicer than anything Lyra had expected. High ceilings, thick carpets, windows overlooking the city. 2 bedrooms connected by a shared sitting area, which meant they could maintain the pretense of distance even if the bond made true separation impossible. Ronan disappeared almost immediately after they arrived, muttering something about checking the perimeter. Lyra suspected he just needed space to process everything that had happened. She couldn't blame him. She stood at the window watching the sun finish its descent, painting the capital in shades of amber and shadow. Somewhere down there, her father was probably receiving word that his plan had failed spectacularly, that his daughter was now untouchable, protected by a title he could never strip away. The thought should have felt like victory. Instead, it just felt hollow. A knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. She opened it to find a servant, young, nervous, holding a tray of food. "Compliments of His Majesty," the girl said, not quite meeting Lyra's eyes. "He thought you might be hungry." "Thank you," Lyra said, taking the tray. The girl curtsied and fled before Lyra could say anything else. She set the tray on the table and stared at it. Roasted meat, fresh bread, fruit she didn't recognize. The kind of meal she'd grown up with, back when her life had been predictable and suffocating. She wasn't hungry. Ronan returned an hour later, his mood darker than when he'd left. He barely glanced at the untouched food before pouring himself water from the pitcher and drinking it in one long pull. "We have a problem," he said. Lyra's stomach tightened. "What kind of problem?" "The kind where Aldrich just informed me that there's a formal banquet tomorrow night in our honor." His voice was flat. "Every noble family in the capital will be there, including yours." My father's coming here?" "Him and your mother. Aldrich's orders." Ronan set the cup down harder than necessary. "He wants to make a spectacle of this. Show the entire court that you've been integrated into the royal family. Make it official." "That's a good thing, isn't it? The more public it is, the harder it'll be for anyone to challenge." "It's a trap," Ronan interrupted. "Aldrich doesn't do anything without an angle. He wants us on display because he's testing us, seeing how we handle the pressure, how you handle your father." Lyra sank into a chair. "What do I do?" "You show up, you smile, you play the part." Ronan's voice softened slightly. "And you remember that you don't owe them anything. Not an apology, not an explanation, nothing." "Easy for you to say." "No, it's not." He crossed to the window, staring out at the darkening city. I've spent 3 years avoiding this place because I knew what would happen the moment I came back. Aldrich would try to control me, use me, turn me into another piece on his board. He paused. But you know what? I'm done running. And you should be too. Lyra looked at him, at the rigid line of his shoulders, the tension in his jaw. He was right. Running hadn't solved anything. It had just delayed the inevitable. Okay, she said quietly. Tomorrow night. We face them together. Ronan glanced back at her, something flickering in his expression. Together. Yeah. The next day passed in a blur of preparations. Servants came and went, bringing clothes, jewelry, cosmetics, everything required to transform Lyra from a runaway bride into a princess. She submitted to it all with numb detachment, letting them dress her in a gown of deep blue silk, pin her hair into something elaborate, paint her face until she looked like someone else entirely. When she finally looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. The girl staring back looked regal, composed. Nothing like the terrified woman who'd stumbled through the streets in a torn wedding dress less than a week ago. You clean up well, Ronan said from the doorway. Lyra turned. He'd changed too. Dark formal clothing that actually fit him. His hair pulled back, the wild edges of him smoothed into something presentable. He looked every inch a prince, and the sight of it made her chest tighten. You too, she managed. He moved into the room, studying her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. How are you feeling? Terrified. You? Same. His mouth curved slightly. But we're good at being terrified and doing it anyway. We've had practice. That pulled a reluctant smile from her. Yeah. I guess we have. The bond hummed between them, warm and steady. Lyra wondered if it would always feel like this. Like an anchor she couldn't quite reach but knew was there, keeping her from drifting too far. Ready? Ronan asked, offering his arm. She took it. As I'll ever be. The banquet hall was magnificent in the worst way, all gold and crystal and oppressive grandeur. Long tables stretched the length of the room, already crowded with nobles dressed in their finest. Candles blazed from massive chandeliers, casting flickering light across faces that turned to watch as Lyra and Ronan entered. The whispers started immediately. Lyra kept her chin up, her hand steady on Ronan's arm. She could feel every eye on her, cataloging every detail, judging, measuring, let them look. They were escorted to the head table where Aldrich sat, looking every bit the powerful king. He smiled as they approached, the expression not reaching his eyes. Brother, sister-in-law, how lovely you both look. He gestured to the seats beside him. Please, join me. They sat. Lyra's hands were shaking under the table, but she kept her expression neutral. The meal began, course after elaborate course, each more excessive than the last. Lyra barely tasted any of it. She was too focused on the conversations happening around her, the pointed glances, the thinly veiled curiosity. Halfway through the third course, she saw them. Her parents. They were seated at a table near the center of the room, close enough to be visible, but far enough to mark their reduced status. Her father looked older than she remembered, his face tight with barely controlled rage. Her mother sat beside him, her expression carefully blank. Their eyes met across the room. Lyra didn't look away. After what felt like hours, the meal finally ended. Aldrich stood, raising his glass. A toast, he announced, his voice carrying easily across the hall. To my brother, Prince Ronan, who has finally returned to us, and to his new bride, Princess Lyra, who has brought fresh energy to our court. The nobles raised their glasses, murmuring polite agreement. May their bond be strong, Aldrich continued, his smile sharp. May their loyalty to the crown be unwavering, and may they remember that with great privilege comes great responsibility. The last part was aimed directly at Ronan. Lyra felt him tense beside her. They drank. As people began to move around the hall, mingling and gossiping, Lyra spotted her father approaching. Her mother trailed behind him, her expression resigned. Princess Lyra, Gareth said, the title dripping with sarcasm. How fortunate we are to see you again. Ronan started to stand, but Lyra put a hand on his arm. I've got this. She rose, facing her father directly. Up close, she could see the fury radiating off him like heat. Father, she said coolly. Mother. You've made quite a mess,
Gareth said, his voice low. Do you have any idea what you've cost me? The alliances you've destroyed? The humiliation? I don't care, Lyra interrupted. Her father's eyes widened. What did you say? I said I don't care. Lyra's voice was steady, even though her heart was racing. You were going to sell me to a man who would have broken me. You didn't care what I wanted. You didn't care what it would do to me. You just cared about your debts and your reputation. You ungrateful. No. Lyra stepped closer, dropping her voice so only her parents could hear. I'm done being grateful for scraps of basic decency. I'm done pretending that what you did was anything other than cruel. You failed me, both of you, and I'm not apologizing for saving myself. Her mother flinched. For the first time in years, Lyra saw something other than cold calculation in her eyes. Shame, maybe. Or regret. Her father, however, just looked angrier. You think you've won, he hissed. You think this title protects you, but you're still the same spoiled, foolish girl who— Finish that sentence, Ronan said quietly, suddenly standing beside Lyra, and I'll have you removed from this hall, permanently. Gareth's mouth snapped shut. He looked between them, his face mottled red. This isn't over, he said finally. Yeah, it is, Lyra replied. You don't get to control me anymore. You don't get to decide my future. And if you ever try to contact me again, I'll make sure the entire court knows exactly what kind of father you are. She turned and walked away before he could respond, Ronan at her side. Her hands were shaking so badly she had to clasp them together. But inside, beneath the fear and the adrenaline, she felt something else. Freedom. Well done, Ronan murmured. I think I'm going to throw up, Lyra whispered back. Not here. Wait until we're outside. They made it through another hour of forced pleasantries before Aldrich finally dismissed them. Lyra practically fled the banquet hall, Ronan following close behind. They didn't stop until they reached the courtyard from the previous night. Empty, quiet, blissfully free of watching eyes. Lyra collapsed onto a bench, her breath coming in short gasps. She wasn't crying, but she felt like she might. You all right? Ronan asked, sitting beside her. I don't know. Ask me in an hour. Fair enough. He leaned back, his eyes on the stars. For what it's worth, you handled that better than I expected. I wanted to scream at him, tell him everything he'd put me through. But you didn't. You stayed in control. That's what matters. Lyra looked at him. Do you ever regret it? The bond? Getting dragged into all of this? Ronan was quiet for a long moment. No, he said finally. It's complicated, and it's messy, and Aldrich's going to use it against me every chance he gets. But no, I don't regret it. Why not? He turned to face her fully. In the moonlight, his features were softer, less guarded. Because you're worth it, he said simply. I didn't know that when we bonded, but I know it now. Lyra's throat tightened. I'm not— Yes, you are. His voice was firm. You stood in front of a king and didn't flinch. You faced down your father. You walked into a room full of people who wanted to see you fail, and you didn't give them the satisfaction. You're stronger than you think. She wanted to argue, but the look in his eyes stopped her. He meant it. Thank you, she whispered. Ronan nodded once, then stood. Come on, let's get out of here before someone else decides they need to talk to us. They walked back to their rooms in comfortable silence. At the door, Ronan paused. Lyra? Yeah? Whatever happens next, whatever games Aldrich plays, whatever your father tries, we handle it together. All right? The bond thrummed between them, warm and sure. All right, she said. Over the next few weeks, something shifted. Lyra began to find her footing in the court. It wasn't easy. Every day brought new challenges, new tests of her patience and composure. But she learned quickly, learned which nobles could be trusted and which ones reported everything back to Aldrich, learned how to navigate conversations that were really negotiations, learned when to speak and when to stay silent. And Ronan was there, always. Not hovering, not controlling, but present, teaching her the unspoken rules, running interference when the politics got too thick, making it clear to everyone that she wasn't alone. The bond deepened. Lyra could feel it, the way her awareness of him had become instinctive, the way she could sense his mood even from across the palace. It should have felt invasive.
Instead, it felt like safety. One morning, she received an unexpected visitor. A servant knocked on her door, announcing that someone was requesting an audience. When Lyra emerged, she found a man waiting in the sitting room. Thin, nervous, familiar. Davrin. She stopped in the doorway, her stomach dropping. He looked terrible. Thinner than she remembered, with dark circles under his eyes and clothes that had seen better days. When he saw her, he flinched. "Lyra," he started. Get out," she said flatly. "Please, just hear me out." "Why? So you can lie to me again? So you can explain how it wasn't personal?" Davrin's face crumpled. I know what I did was—" "You used me," Lyra interrupted, her voice hard. "You made me think you loved me, and the entire time you were just after my money. So no, I'm not hearing you out. Leave." "They arrested me," Davrin blurted, "after you disappeared. Your father had me thrown in jail. Said I'd corrupted his daughter. I've been there for weeks. They only just released me." Lyra felt nothing. No sympathy, no satisfaction, just cold indifference. "That's not my problem." "I'm sorry," Davrin said desperately. "I know it doesn't fix anything, but I am. I was stupid, greedy. I thought I could get the money and everything would be fine, but I was wrong, and I've been paying for it ever since." "Good," Lyra said. "You should pay for it. What you did, what you almost did to me, it was unforgivable." "I know. Do you?" She stepped closer, her voice dropping. "Do you have any idea what would have happened if I'd gone back, if I'd married Morven like my father wanted? He would have destroyed me, Davrin, slowly, piece by piece. And you were fine with that as long as you got paid." Davrin's eyes filled with tears. "I wasn't thinking—" "No, you weren't," Lyra straightened. "But I was. I made a choice that saved my life, and I'm not sorry for it, not even a little bit." The door behind her opened. Ronan stepped inside, his expression hardening when he saw Davrin. "Problem?" he asked quietly. "No," Lyra said. "He was just leaving." Davrin looked between them, something broken in his face. "I really am sorry." "I don't care," Lyra said, and she meant it. Davrin left without another word. Ronan watched him go, then turned to Lyra. "You all right?" "Yeah," she said, surprised to find it was true. "I am." "Good." He moved closer, studying her face. "You know, when I first met you, I thought you were going to fall apart. Thought the bond was the only thing keeping you upright. And now? Now I think you would have survived with or without me. You just didn't know it yet." Lyra smiled despite herself. "Don't sell yourself short. You definitely helped." "Maybe a little." A month after the banquet, Aldrich summoned them both to a private meeting. They found him in his study, a smaller, more intimate space than the throne room, but no less intimidating. He was reading something when they entered, and didn't look up for several long seconds. Finally, he set the paper aside. "Sit," he said. They did. Aldrich leaned back in his chair, studying them both. "You've surprised me." "How so?" Ronan asked cautiously. "I expected you to fail, both of you." Aldrich's tone was matter-of-fact. "I thought the pressure of court would break you, Lyra, and I thought you, brother, would get bored and disappear again within a month." "And yet here we are," Ronan said dryly. "Yes, here you are." Aldrich's gaze shifted to Lyra. "You've handled yourself well, better than most born into this life. The nobles respect you, some even like you. That's unexpected." Lyra didn't know what to say to that, so she stayed silent. "I have a proposition," Aldrich continued. "You've proven you can navigate court politics, that you're not just some frightened girl playing dress-up, so I'm offering you a position." "What kind of position?" Lyra asked carefully. "Ambassador. There are noble houses in the outer territories that need managing, alliances that need maintaining. You'd represent the crown, handle negotiations, be my voice in places where I can't be." Lyra blinked. "You're asking me to work for you?" "I'm asking you to use your talent for something productive. You're wasted as just a decorative princess, but as an active member of the court, you could be useful." "And if I refuse?" Aldrich shrugged. "Then you don't. But you strike me as someone who'd rather be doing something than sitting idle." He was right, and they both knew it. "I'll think about it," Lyra said. Fair enough? Aldrich turned to Ronan. And you? I have assignments that need someone I can trust, which, unfortunately, is a very short list. Are you in, or are you going to fight me on this too? Ronan's jaw tightened. Depends on the assignments. Nothing that violates your precious morals, just problem solving. You're good at that. The brothers stared at each other for a long moment. Finally, Ronan nodded. Fine, but if you try to use me against Lyra, you'll burn the court down. I know. You've made that abundantly clear. Aldrich smiled faintly. You're dismissed. They left the study together. He's actually giving us real work, Lyra said, still processing. He's giving us ways to be useful to him, Ronan corrected. But yeah, real work. Are you going to take it? Probably. You? Lyra thought about it. About the girl she'd been a month ago, desperate, terrified, convinced she had no options, and about the woman she was becoming. Someone who could stand in front of a king and negotiate. Someone who didn't need permission to exist. Yeah, she said. I think I will. 3 months later, Lyra stood in the great hall, surrounded by nobles and courtiers, as Aldrich formally announced her new role. She wore the blue silk gown again, but this time it felt different. Not like a costume, like armor. Ronan stood beside her, his presence steady and sure. Aldrich finished his speech, and the room erupted in polite applause. Afterward, as the crowd dispersed, Lyra found herself near the windows overlooking the city. The same view she'd stared at on that first night when everything had felt overwhelming and impossible. Penny for your thoughts, Ronan said, appearing beside her. Just thinking about how much has changed. Regret any of it? She considered the question seriously. The fear, the pain, the uncertainty. All of it had been real. But so was this, standing here, free, with a future she'd chosen for herself. No, she said finally. I don't. Ronan smiled, a real one, rare and genuine. Good. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the capital. Somewhere in the distance, church bells rang, not for a wedding this time, but for the changing of the guard. The end of one shift, the beginning of another. Lyra thought about the girl who'd run through the streets in a torn wedding dress, desperate and alone. About the choice she'd made in that dark alley. About everything that had come after. She'd been right to run, right to fight, right to choose herself, even when it seemed impossible. And now, standing here beside the man who'd helped her survive it all, she realized something else. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was living. Thank you, she said quietly. Ronan glanced at her. For what? For saying yes, that night in the alley. You could have walked away. So could you. No, Lyra said, shaking her head. I really couldn't, but you had a choice, and you chose to help me anyway. Ronan was quiet for a moment. Then he reached out, taking her hand in his, the bond mark on her palm pressed against his, a perfect mirror. I think we helped each other, he said. Lyra squeezed his hand. Yeah, I think we did. The sun dipped below the horizon, and the sky blazed with color, reds and golds and purples so vivid they looked painted. Lyra watched it all, feeling the weight of everything she'd survived settling into something lighter. Not happiness, exactly. Not yet, but peace. And that was enough. For now, it was more than enough. Behind them, the palace came alive with evening activity, servants lighting candles, nobles gathering for dinner, the endless machinery of court grinding forward. But here, in this quiet moment, Lyra and Ronan stood together, watching the world turn. Two people who'd been broken in different ways, who'd found each other in the dark, and who'd somehow built something real out of desperation and defiance. A bond that couldn't be broken, a future that belonged to them, and a story that had started with fear but ended with something far more powerful. Choice. Lyra had chosen to run, to fight, to survive, and in choosing herself she'd found something she never expected. A place where she belonged, not because someone had given it to her, but because she'd claimed it, earned it, made it hers. She was no longer the girl her father had tried to sell, no longer the bride who'd fled her own wedding. She was Princess Lyra Valicrest, ambassador, survivor, and someone who'd learned the hardest lesson of all, that the only person who could save her was herself. And she had. The bells rang again, echoing across the city, marking the passage of time. Lyra listened to them fade, then turned to Ronan. "Ready to go in?" she asked. He looked at her, really looked at her, and something warm flickered in his eyes. "Yeah," he said. "Let's go." They walked back into the palace together, hand in hand, leaving the sunset behind. And for the first time in her life, Lyra wasn't afraid of what came next. Because whatever it was, she would face it. Not as someone's daughter, not as someone's bride, but as herself. And that was all she'd ever needed to be.